everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here with my wonderful colleague, Josh, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about what to do now that you have all of these amazing college decisions in hand.
Yes, which is usually the best part of the job. Obviously, there's still a lot of kids waiting to hear back over the next few weeks. Hopefully you've heard back from some early schools, but we want you guys to already kind of start thinking about this ahead of hearing back from the rest of the schools.
And Josh is right. We're going to touch on what to do about waitlist options as well today.
Okay. I'm assuming we're gonna have people from all over the world. Obviously, if you have individual questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. I'm based in South Florida, but obviously work with a lot of kids all over the world, including Europe, Middle East, and Asia. And then Andrea's in Pittsburgh.
Yep, that's right. Go Steelers.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing is you may, as Josh mentioned, you may already have some early decisions in your hand from early action or rolling schools. So we're going to pretend that you have, now decisions in front of you. You're narrowing it down to 2 or 3 different options. And really, how do you choose between them? Because everybody is lovely on paper and you loved your visits if you did them in person, or you loved the research about them. But really now, what does it come down to picking the best school option for you?
Yeah. I mean, not too much to add there, but obviously, hopefully you do have those options. And at this point, it's not so much, I think our talk is not like, and we'll talk about the rankings later on. It's really about finding the right fit. That's what it's been about the entire time, even before applying to the schools. So now, even if you have options in front of you, you really got to think about what's the right fit for each individual kid.
Absolutely. So, just let's touch on some clear cut, first moment things for families to consider, which of course is a big one: financial aid and scholarship. I mean, the cost of college continues to go up, and you may find from your offers of admission that these things vary significantly from school to school.
Yeah, as well as scholarships, I think, we've had some kids who maybe it's a school that's not as high on their list, but they've offered them, $10,000 scholarship or $20,000 scholarship. And now that becomes a factor to really, really consider. Because that's, we put down here, taking on debt is really a long-term decision. Obviously, you hear about student loans all the time. People who had jobs for years and years and years, well-paying jobs, still paying off student loans. So obviously, if you're in a position where you don't have to worry about that, that's great. And for those that do, really take time to consider how it all factors in.
Absolutely. And financial aid packages, if you've ever seen one, they can be tricky to understand. And sometimes the wording is not clear from one to the other to compare, school to school. So make sure you're reading the information very carefully. And if you have any questions about what's included or not included, to be in touch with that college's either financial aid office or the admissions office contact that you've been working with. We want you to make sure you're understanding everything you're really taking on and what's included in that if you're trying to compare financial aid packages.
Yeah, I remember, like, personally, when I got to college, our first bill for the first semester it was a little bit higher than what my parents had anticipated. It just seemed like there was a mistake that had been made. And obviously I talked to one person, they're like, well, that's what it is. Like, you have to pay that. And then I talked to someone else and they're like, oh, let's look at it again. And there was a mistake that had been made and they hadn't considered, something about my mom and all that. And the next thing you know, it was a completely different bill like a week later. So, you can't, like you said, you kind of have to negotiate is the point here, and kind of like don't always kind of go with the first option.
Right.
It's something that unfortunately, especially in the US, like the cost of the attendance, like really, really, really matters. We can't talk enough about that. The other thing about scholarships, obviously, most of financial aid does come from the school itself. There are opportunities to get outside scholarships. We always encourage students to kind of explore those, apply to them, even if it's not like the largest amount. Sometimes it's really good networks. I was part of a scholarship foundation based out of Connecticut that, paid for kids to go to schools all over the country. And we would have like, these luncheons and like we had a mentor involved as well. So, there's a lot of things that can come from those scholarship foundations.
Absolutely. And one thing additionally to note about scholarships is as you're reviewing the package from the college is to make sure it's clear and that you understand how those scholarships fold into the overall package itself. Is it renewable for all 4 years? What is the criteria to maintain it for all 4 years? Is that a manageable thing for you to do? Should you anticipate that amount of money supporting you each and every year that you're enrolled? So it's just something to really pay attention to, because that also can vary widely from school to school.
Yeah.
So additionally to all of those things, of course, and Josh mentioned the term, which I think is a very important term in talking about the cost of college, is the cost of attendance. So it's not just tuition and room and board, which is what everybody hears the most about, but the total cost of attendance. And so, of course, that includes your day-to-day living at the college and your travel expenses to and from the college. Are you going to school in Boston, which is an expensive city, versus Columbus, Ohio, which might, have a very, very different cost of living around. Things like do you need a computer? College books are expensive. Has anyone bought them recently? They're quite expensive. And so these are just a few of those added cost of attendance items that we think is important for families to think about and consider.
Yeah, one thing about obviously the college books, just real quick. Obviously, if you buy a book for a semester, and the whole goal is like to read the book within the semester, always go to the library first to see if that book is at the library, and you can just check it out for free for a few weeks. So then you're kind of, you're
Yes.
still getting the same material. So
yes,
I'll leave that there. All right. So the next stage is obviously, all right, the feeling around which decision to make. And we do encourage visiting if possible. I actually had a student refer to this as the victory tour. I thought it was pretty good way to put it.
Yes.
The admit student days, those are a great way to kind of realize, oh, like these are the exact kind of people I want to be around. You get, everyone's excited, obviously, but for whatever reason, you're gonna get a feeling around your future classmates. So we always encourage that. And obviously the school, this is a big part of what I did at Yale Admissions, was organizing Bulldog Days. We understood that if a kid got into 4 or 5 schools, it was our job to convince them that like this was the best fit for you. So, put on really good events, host kind of classroom guest speakers in certain classes. Obviously a lot of food. There's always gonna be a lot of food. And typically
yes.
if the food's not good at the admin weekend,
Yeah.
probably not a good sign for the rest of your time there. So just again, if food is very important to you, keep that in mind.
It's true. They do roll out the red carpet at those admitted student day events. It's so true. It's so true. But another important point, of course, if you can visit, of course, we think that's so valuable, or revisit if you've been there once, but maybe that was in the end of 10th grade or early in 11th grade. But there's also virtual research, you can do to investigate more fully the life of the school. But we also think it's important. You're going to live on this campus, right, hopefully for 4 years. And so look beyond the campus itself. What's the surrounding neighborhood? Do they have easy transportation if you want to go into the city to see a play or visit a museum? What amenities for daily normal life are on campus or nearby? And is it safe? Is it safe to get off campus on your own? Is it safe to walk around? These are things that you really need to consider, although it's not fun to consider that aspect, but it's an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and I do think psychologically the revisit, if you've been there before, it's just different, right? When you visit it for that first time, you're obviously trying to get an impression from the school to decide whether or not you're going to apply. But once you're there, it's the visit is like, not do I see myself here? It's like, do I really, really see myself here as I'm walking around? And for whatever reason, kids can get that at multiple schools, but usually there's one that they know this is the one. Right. So that's where the revisit can really, really, kind of confirm things.
So a few other things, right, to think about in terms of academics. So obviously, when you did your research, you probably had some majors in mind, which helped shape your list and where you applied. And so now it's time to take a deeper dive and really look at those particular courses, what's available within those majors. When do you have to declare a major? Is there flexibility? Can you change your mind? And really, what does that look like from school to school? Because there are many majors that feel like a big umbrella and offer many different things within that circle. but how many of those apply to you? Like, what are your particular interests, and what does the school have to support that line of education?
Yeah, I think with the flexibility, for example, we have a lot of students who apply to NYU. I think it's actually the most applied to private school in the country. And let's say that you got into a business school at another university, but you didn't get into Stern, but you're like, oh, I'll just transfer into Stern like when I get there. And at Stern, you can't do that, right? If anything, maybe after your first year, if you have excellent grades, but maybe even after your second year. So, if you really want to start with business right away, there might be another school that's a better fit. Um, yeah, and then the research opportunities, like you mentioned, there's times where right away, like you have access to that, and some schools promote it. And I think a lot of students kind of underestimate, especially if you are obviously going down the STEM path, but even in social sciences, even in psychology, the ability to get into research early on opens up a lot of doors.
Absolutely. And I alluded to this in the last slide, but your own personal specific needs and interests. So ways to explore that, right, in these college acceptances would be check out their social media pages for certain clubs or majors or teams, right? This is the way students find information now, right, is through social media. And most colleges have ample opportunities for students to sort of dive deeper into what they offer through these channels. And in thinking about the culture of the school, right? We want you to be at a place that challenges you, but also supports you and propels you in a positive way. So, what is the student life like? The overall culture? What's the vibe? Is it overly Greek? Is that good for you? Is that not good for you? Is the academic culture more competitive or not? Is that how you operate? Do you really love a vibrant sports community, right? Painting your chest and getting in line for tickets early and screaming at the top of your lungs. Do you want that life? These are things now that you can really hone in on after you've done the major sort of big picture research. And again, think about your day-to-day life within the college community.
I mean, obviously right now it's March Madness, right? We're
Yes.
close to March Madness. I don't
Yes.
know if I would fully recommend basing on the team's success in the tournament as like, well, if whoever goes further, like that's where I'm gonna end up going, or whoever wins the national championship. But maybe that's a sign. Like the year that you were considering going is the year that they got all the way. Like, some of these things matter to some people. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, especially like you said, the competitive academic culture, there really just are schools where there's a collaborative atmosphere when it comes to the academics.
Yeah.
Students share notes willingly, study groups, things of that nature. They recommend classes to take, and there's other schools where if you go to like the professor recommendations, it's like a lot of bashing because people are actually trying to discourage you from taking the class. It's just
Yes.
different. Places are different. So now is a time, and don't necessarily deep dive into Reddit
Right.
or College Confidential, things like that. It's ask current students, ask, if your high school has sent kids to that school in the past, ask your counselor, hey, is it okay for me to reach out? Even a phone call, Zoom call can really make a difference.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. Check with your school to see if there are students there that you can tap into as a resource. I love that suggestion.
Okay. Yeah, post grad success. Yeah, that's one thing
Great.
I didn't think about as much as I should have. But the reality is, and I think some schools do a much better job than others as far as promoting this. Like, you see some schools kind of climb up all types of profiles as far as like, hey, like these kids are making X amount after graduation, or we place this many students, right away into a job, 3 months out of graduation. That stuff matters. And it's like, if you're meant to do it on your own, it can be a little bit tricky, but if the school has a lot of resources, that's instrumental.
Absolutely. This has sort of been a growing trend, I think, in colleges focusing on sort of supporting students with that lens through career, right, trajectory. And I can't imagine a college does not have a career services office. Most of them do. But how proactive are they? How much do you have to self-advocate? There are colleges today that literally pair you your first, days on campus with a career counselor, just like you do an academic advisor. And so these are things to really think about in terms of where do you see yourself right after your 4 years of undergraduate? Is it getting a job? Is it going to grad school? Do they have support around the testing needed for that, or the application process for graduate level work. Can you do internships right in school, or co-ops that will help set you up for success beyond your 4-year undergraduate experience? And of course, strong alumni networks. Lots of these colleges have wonderful networks throughout the country, throughout the world, that can help with internships, or even just connecting with to learn about their profession and make connections right in that specific world, that could lead to a connection, an interview, or potentially even a job.
Yeah, I think on the career search front, especially from career fairs, right? You hear about career fairs, obviously you hear about college fairs at this point, but the career fairs are interesting because, first of all, who's showing up to those career fairs? What kind of companies? Are you going to a school where all sounds like a lot of finance companies? You're like, why don't they want to go into finance? But if you did, it's like, oh wow, look at all these different banks that are coming to our school. Or how often are the fairs happening? Is it once a year? Is it 4 times a year? Right? Is it only for the juniors and seniors? Is it open to everyone? So these are kind of questions. If you do, especially once you get admitted, obviously you don't have the school email yet until you actually enroll into or confirm your admission. But you do have almost a right to reach out to more people at the school now, right? You're not
Yes.
only allowed to
Yes.
contact admissions. So, we encourage that 100%. And then on the alumni network, it's literally, no, like, do you have an alumni network? Is there a database? And like,
Yes.
how many people are on that database? How far back does it go? That was honestly when I graduated, the way that I got like my first 5 or 6 interviews was through the alumni database, in the city that I lived in, because it was a very, very organized database. Other places like, oh yeah, we have a LinkedIn. It's like, well, anyone can join the LinkedIn page,
Right.
like, or Facebook. It's like, that's a little bit different. It's obviously valuable, but we're talking like an actual, the only way you can be on this database is if you attended this school.
Yeah.
All right. And
Very, very valuable. Yes.
all right, the magic word, the ranking.
Right. Please don't rely solely on the rankings when you're making your final choice. Of course, that can come into play. It probably came into play as you built your application list. But there's so much more to a school, beyond the rankings. Please, let's talk about those for a minute here, Josh, right?
Yeah, I mean, we get it. You want to aim high, but the thing about it's like music. Like, you can't say like, okay, I guess it's the Grammys, but
Yes.
someone's favorite band is someone else's. Like, why would you ever listen to that band, right? The point is, schools leave different feelings for different people. Rankings, I think obviously if you're saying top 20, top 50, top 100, these things can kind of matter to people, but ultimately you shouldn't say, well, one's 16 and one is 19 on US World News Report, I will go to 16. It's like, please don't do that, right? Pretty much every school you've been accepted to is a very good school. For some kids, it actually makes more sense to go to a school that's maybe considered a bit less academically prestigious, but they can excel there, as opposed to just being like a small fish in a big pond, or feeling like they have imposter syndrome, which again, something that I went through myself, right? So it comes back to the whole idea of the right fit. Ask the people that know you best. We put down here family, friends, obviously the current students, and so on. The pro con list is a must. And again, it's like, yeah, we talked about the food, obviously location, climate, things of that nature. Different things matter more to different people, right? So once you've written out that list, sometimes again that can really accentuate the feeling.
Absolutely. And I say you have to really be true to yourself in creating that list, right? And really be authentic. Like, your day-to-day life is helps you be more successful in and out of school, right? In and out of class. And quite often your life becomes the life of the school, no matter where you pick. And if you really embrace this college community when you're there and get yourself involved, things will fall into place. It may not feel that way at first. I think a lot of students, their first semester away at college is a little rocky. They're a little unsure of things, but typically by the spring, the students find their rhythm. They're in good classes. They have connections with friends outside of class. Like, things are starting to fall into place. So school on day one may not be perfect for you, and that's true across the board, no matter what the school, no matter what. But you have to trust your research and trust your sort of gut feeling, and really embrace the opportunity and let that lead where it will.
Yeah, it also honestly might be one of the first times in a young person's life that they disagree with their parents on a very important decision.
Yep.
That's always a little bit tricky. I get that. And sometimes it's like, well, let's say a student wants to go to a bigger, more rah-rah school, but they got into a smaller liberal arts college that obviously looks pretty good on the resume. And both people, both sides have a very, very strong case, but you don't want to see like the family break, ultimately, I think if
Yes.
a young person really takes, it's like, hey, like I've taken a lot of time into this decision. I feel these are the reasons why I want to go to this school,
Yep.
and don't think about it like, oh, if I don't like it, I'll transfer. It's like, no, no, no. Like, let's go with like the right school off the bat, right? So that,
Right.
and get like Andrew said, give yourself time to adapt to that environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oops. All right, the wait lists.
Okay, here we go. This is the
Yeah.
never-ending great discussion about what is it? Josh, what is the wait list?
What's funny is that it's something that's becoming more and more popular, right?
Yeah,
It's a trend. Let's say it's a maybe, right? It's a
right.
maybe. Every school's a little bit different as far as your chances once you get on the wait list. But let's say you've applied regular decision to a school. You're supposed to hear back end of March, early April, and then the decision comes back and says, "Hey, we like your application. At this moment, we cannot offer you admission, but we're putting you on the wait list, and we'll be back in touch." Sometimes they'll say in May or in June. Obviously, it's once May 1st has passed, but obviously that date's been pushed back a little bit this year for some schools. But it's usually once they've got a sense of, okay, this many students accepted their spots. And sometimes if it's under what they had kind of projected, then they'll go to their wait list to kind of fill out the rest of their class.
Absolutely. So the key there is that it really depends. There's no set when colleges go to the wait list. It can vary widely. Typically, as Josh said, it's after May 1, which is the traditional right national deposit deadline. Although this year we have an asterisk by that because colleges are shifting that because of some financial aid form glitches. But some can go early, some can go before that. As Josh said, if they're trending one direction, they may start slowly making a few offers from the wait list in the weeks leading up to their deposit deadline.
Yeah. And the other thing is, kids always ask, where am I on the wait list? Am I at the top of the wait
Yes.
list? I'm in the middle of the wait list. I'm at the bottom. Like this kind of
Yes.
affects my decision making. And of course, schools are going to be a little bit coy, right, in terms of saying like exactly where it might be. What I'll say is I've had kids get into very good schools off the wait list. So we should not look at the wait list as, oh, it's like it's a hard no. If they would have rejected you, they could have rejected you. They could have said no.
Yes.
They put you on the wait list for a reason. Sometimes it helps to obviously show them that, hey, if I am accepted off the wait list, like there's a high chance of me coming. Don't say that. Don't say you're going to come unless you actually plan on accepting, the offer off the wait list. But it comes back to the rankings question. This is one way for them to make themselves seem more selective, right? We accept fewer students in the early round and the regular round. And then, as far as like counting, if you get accepted off the wait list, it's slightly a different metric than if you were accepted right away, right? So that's part of the reasons, why it's becoming more and more popular,
Yes.
especially for schools that maybe once upon a time might have been considered safeties, right? Or not backups, but like a higher chance of getting in. Now kids are getting put on the wait list because they're like, hey, like we're only going to accept you if we actually know you're going to come here,
That's
right?
right. So true. And I think that that speaks to, how do colleges use the wait list? As Josh said, one of the sort of newer emerging ways they're using it is to sort of fill their class, complete their class. They don't want to be under their target number and they don't want to be over enrolled as well. And so by under admitting a class slightly, of course, they are more selective that way. And then it allows them to really fine tune and meet that budgeted, target number almost as precisely as they can. So that's definitely a strategic way colleges are using their wait list. I think they also use it in ways, they have lots of institutional priorities that they want to fill, that they have mandates to fill, these sort of certain categories. For instance, some colleges love to have students from every single state, or maybe they need more male nursing students, or they need more women in STEM. Whatever their trending deposit class looks like, they may use the waitlist to help complete some of those institutional goals as well.
Yeah, and then people, again, coming back to the idea of when they go to their wait list, I was just looking. I had a message from a student on May 16th last year that he got off the wait list to, one of his dream schools. Obviously, they had already put down the deposit for a school by May 1st, which he was relatively excited about, but he was still kind of like, "Is there a chance? Is there a chance?" And then it happened a few weeks later, right? So our philosophy is really like, don't give up hope if that's what you ultimately want. I've seen some go as late as literally like late June,
Yes.
which is,
Yes.
as you're starting to like make travel plans for other colleges. So,
Yes.
colleges are unpredictable, we'll say.
Yes. So true. And Josh, if we go to the next slide, that leads into some of what we're talking about next is of course the very first thing you should do if you want to remain in consideration at that school is accept your spot, right? And today that's often clicking something in your application portal, or replying to a particular email prompt that says, are you interested in remaining on the wait list? Say yes, and say yes right away, and then you have time to think about it. You can change your mind, but if it's at all of interest, say yes right away. Would you agree, Josh?
Yeah, what's funny is so this particular student, they emailed him saying, "Hey, we have news for you, which we'd like to share over a phone call." Right?
Interesting.
So the kid's like, well, luckily he wanted to go to the school. So, you answer the phone and imagine like, "Hey, we're accepting you off the wait list." And sometimes I don't know if it's fully true or not, but like the school's like, "Do you accept?" Like you're kind of like on the spot.
Yes.
It might say like, if you don't accept now, like we can remove it. Like, it's there's a little bit of pressure there sometimes. But
Yes.
again, that's why you want to make sure that, if you accept your spot on the wait list, that's because it's a school that you do actually want to go to, right? If you've already got to other schools that you prefer, then you don't have to accept the spot on that wait list and get prepared for your other school.
That's right. I just met with a student who was offered two waitlist places, and he said, what should I do? But I've been admitted to a school I would probably choose over them. And my response was, then don't go on the wait list, right? If you are sure you would choose this other school, then don't take the spot of someone who truly does want to attend that particular university. I mean, it's fine if there's some financial concerns and you want to, a public local, more cost-friendly school, right, in case of an emergency. But there's no real reason to stay on numerous wait lists unless you truly would attend, right, if given the opportunity. And so, be thoughtful about that, but don't deprive yourself the opportunity at the same time.
Right.
And I think one of the things, of course, as we said, accept the spot, right? That's one of the timely thing to do. But you need to also carefully read their instructions of what they say, because some colleges will say, great, that's all we need from you. Thank you. Please don't send us anything else. Okay. Some colleges may allow you the opportunity to write a continued interest statement. They may allow or ask for updated grade report since the time you applied. Maybe you've had some significant update on your academic achievement or your activities since you applied, and there's a space to provide that in your portal if you're waitlisted. So please read the directions carefully, and follow their instructions.
Yeah, I think obviously at that point the colleges have a lot of information about you. And that's why we always say, even as a senior, like don't stop kind of going just because you click submit, right? Like
Yes.
obviously right now it's the end of winter sports and spring season's kind of taking off. Maybe you guys won a state championship. Like these things, can really, really make a difference. Or maybe you put together a conference, and we understand that, obviously seniors are the ones that are typically in a position of leadership at a school. So sometimes those things actually materialize, after you submit your application. And here's like your chance to share it and actually have it impact the decision of whether or not they accept someone off the wait list.
Absolutely. And, depending on the school, if they do an academic check-in, right, another reason for seniors not to sort of have a downward trend or start living it up with senioritis is you want them to have that updated grade report be as strong, right, and consistent with what you submitted when you applied. They do not want to see, right, you sort of easing up, taking your foot off the gas pedal, totally, and moving from A's to B's or B's to C. They don't want to see that. So it's possible they may ask for an updated academic report from your school. So stay focused. If you really want this, you need to stay focused and keep working.
For sure. And then every school, they tell you in the waitlist letter, in the deferral letter, hey, plan on enrolling in another school, right? Like
Yes.
there's no, your chance of getting in are higher that now that you're on the wait list. And we should also mention sometimes schools literally take 0 kids off a wait list. Like that does happen too. Um,
Yes.
so, and then the next year they might take 80. Like there is, I try to go through the data for this sometimes. It's
Yeah,
like, it's almost pointless because year to
it
year it
is.
changes. But, there's still a level of optimism as long as you don't do the fall.
Absolutely. So number one, please do not have a parent call or email the admissions office. Please do not do that. You are heading off to college. You applied to college. The college, if you're going to make a contact, it needs to be from the student. They want to hear from you. Um, and especially important if it's an actual contact, like a phone call. This is not well received if a parent takes the lead on this. It's just not a good look.
What about if the school counselor makes a call on the student's behalf? Is that okay?
Uh, yes, excellent,
Were you
excellent
a school
question.
counselor? Were you a school
Yeah,
counselor?
that's excellent. You're on it. So yes, of course. And sometimes, colleges are open to these kinds of additional contacts. But if possible, and you speak to your school's counselor, they may be able to make an advocacy call for you. They may be able to send an email in support of you. Again, may not tip the scale, but it can't hurt. And so that's an acceptable adult contacting a school on your behalf would be your school counselor. But if that's the case, it certainly shouldn't just be the school counselor. You should also do it yourself.
Yeah, I've
Um,
heard of one story where the school counselor and the student had a really good relationship, and the counselor had a good relationship with the university, and they were in the counselor's office,
yep.
speakerphone. Hey, I have Billy here with me. Just want to let we both want to let you know that hey so it's like it adds a level of obviously that Billy has confirmed I would go to the school if I'm accepted, and now the
Right.
school counselor saying it with them right there. Okay, they're gonna take that in consideration. Like this kid is very likely to come if we accept them off the wait list.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the second one there, don't respond with an inappropriate tone. Of course, this it's hard to read emotion in email, and you don't want to come across right inappropriately, or in a phone call, of course, where it's easy to figure out tone. But we know it stings. We know you wanted into that school, and we know it stings that you were waitlisted, but please take a breath, take a moment to reflect, and ask appropriate questions. Peppering them with, how did my friend get in and I didn't? How could this have happened? That's not the approach to take. Really, you want to maintain sort of a little grace and some positivity. Indicate you understand how selective the process is, but if there's anything they could use from you that would be helpful, you'd be happy to supply it. That's sort of the tone and the approach I think that we're recommending. Would you agree, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, you can express a little bit of disappointment, but the reality is you got to stay positive. Um, again, in some ways it's a win to be on a wait list. So you're allowed to be, might say, I'm so thrilled to be on the wait list, but it is like you're appreciative of it, right? Like
Yes.
there is no entitlement at this point in the process. So hopefully kids have understood that. And yeah, make sure that you proofread all those emails
Yes.
well, make sure that you address the right people, all things of that nature.
Yes. And don't overdo it. So I'm sure all of us have some funny anecdotes around this. But what we mean by that is you want to contact the admissions office in some way, but you don't want to overdo it. There's a fine line between advocating and annoying, right? Don't email them weekly. Don't do that. Don't show up at their school unannounced and ask for a meeting. Like don't do that. Um, I many years ago had a student, send me cookies, and somebody would send me flowers. Like that's very kind, but we weren't even allowed to accept those. Like this, so that's a little overboard, right? But
Oh,
could you,
bribery.
right? Could you send them a note though and say something like Josh said? Although I'm disappointed, I really appreciate this opportunity. I know how hard your job is. Thank you so much for all you do, and I hope you'll give my file another look. Like that's a nice note to send. But a contact or two between sort of the time you're waitlisted to the time they expect to potentially go to the waitlist, I think that's fine.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it's hard to tell students you did everything you could do. At
Yes.
this point, it's like a lot of sitting and waiting, literally
Yes.
called a wait list. Like we're literally going to sit here and wait.
Yes.
But you have to kind of progress as if it might not happen, right? So psychologically, you're kind of in between, and that's a normal part of it. And for some kids, they don't. That's why they decide like, I do not want to be on a wait list. I want to know. I want to be done with this process. I've been doing this for 6 to 9 months. I'm done. Fine.
Yes.
That's
Yep.
fine. Right? So, everyone's path is a little bit different.
Absolutely. So I hope some of this information was helpful. Um, Josh and I both have been doing this for a long time, and we're happy to answer any questions. I don't know, Josh, if you can see if any popped into the Q&A, but you can see our contact information here. If there's anything as a follow-up that we might be able to help with, I hope you'll let us know.
All right, so in order to see, I think we're good. No questions so far.
Okay.
So in that case, obviously, thank you everyone for joining. Any questions, Josh or J Davis at esmprep.com, and you saw Andrew's as well.
Yep.
Thanks again, and good
I,
luck to everyone with the rest of the process.
I know. Good luck, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.